Well, trust me, Chris Kerber has heard all the jokes. The Blues announcer who he speaks for a living, talks for a living, and everybody that knows Chris Kerbs, he likes to talk a little bit. So imagine him for 10 days not being able to say a single word. We joke a little bit about it, but it was a serious situation. Found out in July he was having some problems with his voice. There were some polyps on his throat, had to have a procedure to have him removed, but he's on the other side of it now. So we catch up with Chris Kerber, the Kilcoyne Conversation, presented as always by Triad Bank, Marie Davila Senior Living, B&G Tuck Pointing, as well as theappliancediscounters.com. Get online, check them out, 4 area locations. And let's check in with Chris because I don't know that folks have heard this story yet. The Blues' longtime announcer now, more than 2 decades, having to deal with a real serious issue.
Bottom line was my voice just didn't quite feel like it was right. And going into the playoffs, even after that time off, it's sort of hoarse. Like you get a cold or something like that and it doesn't feel right. But this was a little too long, so went and got it looked at. And Dr. Joseph Bradley over at BJH found a large polyp on one of the vocal cords. So we got through the playoffs, did a little rehab to get through that, and then had it removed in middle of September.
When you're an announcer and they're talking about vocal cords, how much does that spook you?
Well, it kind of grabs you a little bit. The good news is right off the bat, he was like, look, this happens to lawyers, to teachers, to singers, to people that use their voices a lot. And he's had some great experience, best in the area at this specific surgery. So while he said there is always that little chance that, you come out of this with a hoarse voice or something happens, he says it's not likely. So we just went after it with positivity. He said everything went perfectly smooth. I went 10 days without being able to say anything. That was a unique challenge here in the house. And then we're getting back to normal. I'd say we're probably close to about 90%. I haven't tried to really let it fly yet.
What were those 10 days like? I mean, did you have to muzzle yourself? Did the kids go, I mean, how did you get through that?
I had a whiteboard. I have 3 daughters. So I learned that, frankly, there's a lot of things I don't have to respond to. I just need to really just kind of listen and then wait for them to tell me to respond. And so I'd say maybe life altering in that kind of sense.
So was there ever a fear that, like you said, they told you it's normal, it goes through but was it ever nerve wracking at all when you're going through it, wondering maybe even before they diagnosed it, wondering what the heck's going on?
Yeah, I tell you a lot more beforehand than after, Martin. I was kind of excited to get the procedure done so be back to normal. And with the size of the polyp, it was clear that it had been there for a while. So even going back to the Winter Classic, the night before, feel just fine. Get up that morning, no cold, nothing, but just have no voice. Happened with the All-Star game this past year. And you just had to kind of force it through. Or you'd be doing a game and it would just kind of give out, and you really had to work to get a lot more sound out. So now knowing what it is, it was actually more exciting. Like, okay, let's get back to it. The fun part is now I asked the doctor, I said, so what can I expect? He said, well, it's going to be a lot easier to get the sound out. And I went, holy smokes, we got another level. Like, this is good.
Hey, hold on. Does Joey Vitale know this? It'll be easier for Curbs to talk.
Yeah, I'm just going to surprise him with that one when we get to start up again.
So you were having issues before the season ended. When did they actually tell you what it was? And then was there a gap then before they were able to address it?
We found we got the diagnosis probably, oh man, I don't remember, sometime late July, when we knew that things were going to get going again, but it didn't seem right. And, so we got into the season, met with some of their speech therapists, did some exercises to keep it strong and got through the playoffs. Joe did a lot more talking. I would just get done with a segment and get the heck out. And got through it. And then, with unfortunately a quick run, that made it even easier. So we had the procedure, September 21st, somewhere right around there. And then we're good and ready to go now. Pretty cool.
So when we say polyp, that doesn't necessarily mean cancer, right? It just, or does it? What does that mean?
No, in this case, no. In this case, it was benign, and he could look at it and tell that right away. So this was just being a really loud guy that has talked a lot, and the vocal cords over the years have said that's enough.
Well, since I've got you here, Curbs, let's just, I don't know when the season will happen, but it's because Petro's gone and Krug is in. It's sort of a different look with the Blues. I mean, it's going to be a little strange for a minute, but in a certain way, I mean, not that it's a new era, but it's certainly a new look for this team.
Yeah, it really is a new look. And, Torrey Krug comes in 2 years younger than Alex Pietrangelo. There's no doubt he's going to quarterback the power play right away. If you're giving up a little bit defensively, and I think you are on the defensive side of the puck from going from Alex to Torrey, I think you make that up in the continued growth of a Colton Parayko who's just going into year 6. More consistent play out of Justin Falk with a much more defined role. The continued development of other guys. What does a Scott Perunovich come in and do? I wouldn't put a Cale Makar mantle on him by any stretch of the imagination, but can he have somewhat of a Cale Makar impact along the lines as he grows into it? So I think there's still a ton of reason to be very optimistic. I think the defensive end of this hockey team is still going to remain a strong suit, and that's a real positive.
And in terms of the season itself, what do you think? January? I mean, are you kind of like the fan base, just waiting and wondering when that's going to come?
Martin, I'm like the fan base, and we're like the players, and frankly, we're like a lot of the organizations and even some owners. To be honest with you, I don't think that there really has been a defined plan completely set or even presented because there's so many obstacles. It's still very important for the National Hockey League to play as many games as possible and to do as many as possible with fans in the stands. I think it was important that Bill Daly came out and said that, look, don't think we're locked into having things done by, July 23rd when the NBC Olympic coverage kicks off. This league has proven to be very creative, and they've done a whole heck of a lot right trying to get through to this point. What they pulled off was 0 positive tests in that bubble for 2.5 months was really quite impressive, Martin. So honestly, when fans want to ask it, no bull, I don't know any more than they do. And there's a lot of people inside the business that unless you're basically Gary Bettman or Bill Daly, when you talk to players don't know. Players are wondering right now, how do we train? And think about that. They're like, okay, do we start to ramp it up? Do we just keep it like it's July? How do we do this? And they don't know yet. So a lot is to be defined. But again, I'll go back to something that happened prior to the bubble. I think that fans can really take to heart that the league is going to do what's right, not only for the safety of the players, but without a doubt, they're going to do everything they can to make sure it's a product for the fans and you get fans in as much as possible.
And Curbs, in terms of the C, I think a lot of us just expect it'll be Ryan O'Reilly. Who ultimately will make that call? I mean, do the players get the say? Does management decide? How does that play out?
I think that, well, it's a management decision, management including Doug Armstrong and the coaching staff. But then I'm sure that they will talk to the players, and they'll talk to other members of their leadership group. So it does seem and makes perfectly good sense that Ryan O'Reilly would be a front runner. I think 2 others that you could consider would be Colton Parayko and Braden Shen. The Colton Parayko one, I think they would tend not to put it on him, still being a fairly young defenseman and having had conversations with Al McInnes along this lines, going back to when they named back as captain over Pietrangelo when Alex was much younger. But Braden Shen would be a good option. So they're in some good hands, but you would have to think, at least just with the way that things have gone and the way it's handled, that Ryan O'Reilly makes a perfectly good option right now.
Hey, as long as we had Chris there, figure we'd talk a little Blues hockey, the addition of Torrey Krug, but also the season ahead. Nobody really knows when that NHL season will begin. Curbs, the Blues, the coaches, all of them in the same boat right now. The Kilcoyne Conversation, always presented by Triad Bank, Marie Davila, Senior Living, B&G Tuck Pointing, and Appliance Discounters. Find them on the web at theappliancediscounters.com. And make sure you subscribe. That way, whether we're talking to Chris Pronger or Charlie Marlowe, Whitey Herzog, Kenny Wallace, you name it, you get it directly on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you like to get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe. We'll talk to you again soon.